When Sarah and I lived in the Twin Cities, we got into backpacking for a while. And we went and got ourselves all sorts of cool gear that was on sale. It was definitely meant to be. It was very exciting. And we went up to the Superior Hiking Trail for a couple of short weekend backpacking trips, and everything went really well, except for a weasel that took some of our food one time. And we felt like we were backpackers. And then one summer, the second summer, we decided to take a real backpacking trip. I had a cousin getting married out in Los Angeles, and we thought that after the wedding we'd go up to a national park in the mountains, and we'd find a real trail in the mountains, and we'd leave those silly Minnesota hills behind for the mountains and the wilderness to get that real experience. So we decided we wanted to go to Kings Canyon and Sequoia National Park. And according to the books we were reading, the trails in Sequoia National Park were very easy and beautiful, but there were lots of people on them. And we didn't want those. We wanted some remote trail so we could be off by ourselves in the wilderness. So we found one trail in Kings Canyon that said in the description, remote, quite difficult, watch for rattlesnakes on switchbacks, breathtaking views, bear canister required. And we decided that was the trail for us. How difficult could quite difficult be, huh? We were young, we were fit. Sarah was training for a marathon. I was running with her. It would be great. And in our enthusiasm, we had no idea how stupid we were. I'm telling this story because it's my best wilderness story, but in a way, it's also a story of disrespect, which is an important theme in this temptation passage for today. In our enthusiasm, we were tempted to believe that we could control creation. We could manipulate creation. We could master it at any time. And looking back, I realized that I at least had a lack of respect for creation and, to a certain extent, God too. Well, we made our preparations. We went to the wedding, and then we drove up to Kings Canyon National Park, and we did everything wrong. You're supposed to start the trailhead at the beginning of the day. We checked in about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. The park ranger said, "You're starting now?" We said, "Yep." We had 3.5 to 4 miles to go to get to our campsite. Normally this wouldn't be that big of a deal, but this 3.5 to 4 miles was straight up a mountain. So we got started, and within 20 minutes we were exhausted. This trail was brutal. The mountain was punishing us and mocking us silly Minnesotans who wanted to come out to the wilderness. And we knew we had to hurry, so we're going as fast as we can. We're taking one switchback on this mountain after another. Our eyes are peeled for rattlesnakes. We're singing, "Twinkle, twinkle, little star," trying to scare the bears away that might be around because we saw a fresh bear track on the trail in front of us. Things are not going well at all. We stopped for supper about 6. Sarah has tears in her eyes, and I'm trying to pretend that I'm not scared out of my mind about the fact that we don't know how far our campsite is, and the sun is even now with the tops of the mountains. So we finish our supper. We start out again, still straight up this godforsaken mountain. Our legs are on fire. We're exhausted, and the sun's sinking. It's getting dark, and I'm thinking about what sort of nocturnal animals are out now and hot on our trail. Finally, we stumble onto our campsite. We pitch our tent in a hurry, and as soon as we finish, it's dark. Just like that. We just made it. We wake up the next morning. I think, okay, we'll be refreshed. It'll be a good day. We eat. We start out. Within 10 minutes, I'm just exhausted. My legs are like lead. It's miserable. We're grumpy. The scenery's pretty, but it doesn't matter because we're still going up this stupid mountain. And then finally, a little afternoon, after 7 total hours of hiking, we reach the top of this mountain, and we can look down the other side. And our reward for our hike is the most barren landscape I've ever seen in my life. No trees, no grass, just this big bowl, this valley, this canyon of white, jagged rock. There's a little pond in the bottom with maybe a shrub around it, but nothing else. Now, our plan had been to hike for 5 days. To go through this canyon, there was a campsite somewhere in the middle of it, come out the other side and hike around for a while, and then eventually loop back to the car. We took one look at that barren wilderness and thought, we're not going down there. Let's go back to the car. And so we ate our lunch, took one last look at our pretty wilderness, and went back down to the car. Once we saw our car, we started crying. We'd never been so happy to see our car in our lives. And we went to the nearest Super 8 we could find. And over the next few days, with our blistered feet and our aching legs, we hiked around the easy trails in Sequoia National Park. Now, in our case, disrespect led to wilderness, as it often does. And we learned our lesson enough that by that time, that we turned around before we got in any deeper. Jesus faces 3 temptations in the wilderness with Satan. He's tempted to exert undue power over creation, to change its elements, turn stone into bread. He's tempted to exert power over others politically and militarily, and he's tempted to exert power over God, to force God's protection. And one way of reading this is that in each instance, the temptation is to disrespect something larger in favor of the self. As we pursued our personal achievement of a rugged backpacking trip, we didn't give creation the respect it deserved, and we ended up face to face with a wilderness we couldn't handle. Now, Satan says to Jesus, choose what you want in this moment. Don't worry about how your actions fit into the whole of creation. What's creation anyway? It's just there for your use. Do what you want. Don't think twice. It'll be fine. Satan says, choose the power and fame and control over others that you want. Don't worry so much about what others might want or need. You're the only one that really matters. And think how much you could get done if you had control over everything. Satan says, choose what you want in this moment over what God might want for you. I mean, if God isn't there to serve you, then what is God for? Anyway, Jesus, though, rejects power over nature to serve his appetite, over humans for the sake of glory, and over God for his own survival, all in favor of the path of peace. And in each instance, Jesus chooses respect for others, whether that's creation, that other is creation, humans, or God. Now, our temptations are rarely as obvious as they are in this story. We don't have the little devil on our shoulder saying, I'll give you the whole world if you just worship me. Our temptations usually take shades of gray. Here's something good, but isn't this better? Here's what you need, but isn't this what you really want? Sure, you should probably say no to that, but wouldn't it be okay just this once? Who's going to know? I mean, wouldn't it be wrong to say no? Sorting through these temptations is all too easy for Jesus, but it's never that easy for us. But Jesus still shows us a simple guide for navigating the temptations we struggle with. The guide is respect for others, concern that stretches beyond ourselves. If we can make more decisions while being aware of how connected we are to other people, to creation, and to God, we will walk a more peaceful path. It won't be the easiest path, but it promises to be a peaceful one, or a more peaceful one, a better one. And in responding to these temptations, Jesus is also obedient to God. Now, obedience is a loaded word. When I hear the word obedience, I think dog training. I think of someone else controlling when I sit, bark, or roll over. And I don't want to be controlled, and nobody else does either. But I'm less anxious about this word when I trust that God wants what is best for everyone and everything. That somehow God knows how to fit what is good for me into what is good for everything. And then I'm called to trust that if I can focus on following God's way, if I can be obedient to this way of respect and peace, I'll ultimately find what is best for me too. Respect for others and obedience to God's way of life are our way through whatever wilderness we find ourselves in. When we're in that place where the rocks are jagged, there are no trees, no grass, the walls are high on every side, respecting others and seeking God, seeking what God wants, will help us find what we need. It will help us find our path through the wilderness and toward greener pastures. And respecting others, respecting creation and its power and mystery, respecting our neighbors as ourselves, respecting that though we are part of God's concern, we are not God's whole concern. Respecting others might also help us steer clear of the path that will lead us to wilderness wandering in the first place. May Jesus be our guide. May respect for others be our concern. And may we trust God enough to seek God's way first and let the rest fall into place, whether we're in the wilderness or taking an easy stroll along a flat stretch of the trail. Amen.